I just wanted to talk a little about the connections between health and autism, and I specifically want to focus on the connective tissue, hypermobility syndromes, Ehlers-Danlos and such, and autism spectrum and neurodiversity. So there is some sort of connection, um, like based on empirical evidence, people are talking about it. There hasn't been a whole lot of formal research on it, but a lot of autistic people have the soft skin, the young looks, the, fibromyalgia-like syndromes, which are probably either undiagnosed Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility kind of thing in a lot of cases, chronic fatigue, all this kind of thing. Um, the low muscle tone and the clumsiness, the soft skin. For me, my skin is actually somewhat stretchy. Some people just have like the soft skin. Mine is kind of elastic. And, I'm hypermobile, not crazy. I'm not crazy hypermobile, but, I'm hyper. I'm hyper. Used to be more, but now I'm arthritic. But anyway, hypermobility and autism is common, but it's not always the case. So it's kind of like, but then even autistic people that aren't particularly hypermobile often do have that soft skin and those young looks. Um, a lot of people talk about that, like I'm sure there's different autistic genotypes. Like there's obviously like tons of different ones. Very few of them have actually been discovered, but you do see some similarities in the way a lot of autistic people look. And people with Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility syndromes tend to have a look. And what's interesting about those two looks is they're a little bit similar and interchangeable. Um, you know, some people joke like that autistic people and people with Ehlers-Danlos will have like a fairy or elfish like appearance a little bit, like the high cheekbones and like um, a lot of people with autism seem to have like overbites and stuff. I actually have like a very classic autistic look, but I'm not just talking about myself here. You'd have to go and see for yourself that there is a very, very vague similarity and a few, sort of features that seem to kind of commonly pop up in the autistic and hypermobile syndrome communities. And like I said, they're a little bit interchangeable. Ehlers-Danlos is a spectrum as well. So a lot of people that like are on the autism spectrum might only be a little bit hypermobile, and unfortunately some people are have got the luck of being kind of clinically on the Ehlers-Danlos spectrum. I am clinically on the Ehlers-Danlos spectrum, not severely, but moderately so, and enough that I could that I'm dealing with some complications that are gonna um, are going to get worse and are getting worse as I get older. Um, and so that's another issue, but um, that's really a difficult place to be because people with autism struggle with sensory processing. People with chronic pain struggle with sensory processing. It's hard when you're always in chronic pain to kind of discern when something might be a real problem or if it's just I feel awful again kind of a thing. Um, and then the double whammy for people with autism is that the health issues, autistic people are receiving substandard care when it comes to health. So that's the bottom line. And so that's why the connection hasn't been more firmly established with regards to the connective tissue disorders in autistic people. I think the incidence of it is probably quite high. And especially autistic women. Autistic women seem to be hit a little harder with the health aspect and the physical aspect, and less so with the neuro aspect. Not that we don't suffer in our own way, because we do. There has been a couple of psychologists that specialize in diagnosing females that have noticed that we are quite afflicted with the health piece of it. Um, anyway, there is definitely a connection between neurodiverse conditions and even ADHD and stuff and connective tissue. it's something definitely genetic. And, like we're on the threshold of like a massive thing here. And it's going to be, I hate to say it, but it's going to be very difficult if, you know, people and systems and finance and everything doesn't start shifting to accommodate the wave of people that are physically and neurologically divergent in the nature of what they experience. And there needs to be research. I don't doubt that the food supply has something to do with these changes in physicality and neurology. I don't like to say autism is a disease because I don't feel it is. Um, I think it's a different condition, different wiring, but that we are more prone to neuroinflammation, and that is what you can see. Um, you see a lot of struggle with cognitive disability in people with autism. But I don't think it actually needs to be there. I don't think it's part of the autism itself. Um, but it's almost inevitable that most people on the clinical autism spectrum have some degree of neuroinflammation and thus cognitive challenge. And that I think actually is separate to the autistic condition, which I feel is natural. Um, anyway, blah 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 about that. Um, this connective tissue thing, though, I actually one could say the same thing about that. And that needs to be solved because that's bloody serious. I mean, one thing to suffer neurologically in your life, but to be so collagen, I hate to say collagen mutated, but I'll say it because look at me, I'm melting, I'm turning into a plastic something. It's really creepy, actually. But anyway, it's not funny. I'm serious. I'm saying that I think that a little bit of hypermobility syndrome is great. You look at ballerinas, you look at gymnasts, you look at the kind of, they're kind of divergent. They're almost a little bit of connective tissue stuff could make one an athlete, but too much of a good thing, I think, is what you're seeing in these connective tissue disorders. Is too much of a good thing. It's like excess collagen. It's not like a problem. It's an excess sort of thing. It's not synthesized properly, so it's sort of over expressing kind of thing in some way. Recently there were there's some there's some proposed connections to vitamin C regarding that, and that apparently taking vitamin C helps people with Ehlers-Danlos a little bit. But back to what I was saying is this too much of a good thing, and it could be the same kind of thing with the autistic condition where it's like too much hyperperception and overfiring of neurons could just cause complete sensory overload and thus disable the brain. And so it's both of these things are kind of born out of a too much of a good thing. And I'm sorry to, I've got to say it. I don't care what people think or say. It leads me to believe that the GMOs have something to do with it, because what are the GMOs? A perfectly red, shiny apple, a perfectly wonderful slice of cake, a perfectly aromatic cup of coffee, a perfect corn on the cob. It's just too perfect. I mean, it's too much of a good thing. And how natural is that? Could you, consume this when you're pregnant, or it's just in the environment? I mean, it's people start having too much of a good thing, and then your body goes, too much of a good thing. And the next thing you know, you got neuroinflammation and Ehlers-Danlos and all this thing. But the ultimate question is like, is it natural evolution, like part of this body type being kind of hyperflexible and potentially hyper athletic in the lower grade versions of it? Um, like I said, ballet and gymnastics, swimming, running, sprint. Actually, the autistic people who don't have the illness version of Ehlers-Danlos and are more like functionally, athletically hypermobile do excel in those particular activities. if you think about it. My older son doesn't have the health physical piece of it. He's clinically autistic, but strong as you can imagine. And he's got these hypertonic muscles, and he helps me around the house. And he's just an amazingly strong kid. He can climb walls, he can do chin ups on the monkey bars. It's just unreal. Whereas my younger son, who's not clinically autistic, hurts his legs a lot, bruises easily, struggles with tiredness, struggles with moodiness and spacing out, struggles with ADD. Is not autistic, but is definitely hypermobile and is waiting to be evaluated for EDS. And so my sons both have like a piece of this genetic thing. And, it doesn't help that their dad, I mean, to add to it, their dad is also autistic and has some sort of genetic health thing that he struggles with. He's been labeled as chronic fatigue at the moment, but, we know there's more to it. So I speak from the horse's mouth here. This is my family. This is what I deal with. This is what we live every day. But so those are just some thoughts coming from a person who lives it and is it. I wouldn't want to think of myself as a mutant, as a victim. I am proud. Now I'm going to get emotional of being an autistic person, even in spite of all the prejudice that I've received. I fear for my future with regards to my EDS because some days are hard to just live and function. It's getting worse, and I'm having a really hard time accessing actual medical care. That part I fear. But I don't think it needs to be this way either. I think something is kind of causing it to be worse, and I know a lot of people say there's no cure, and just have to accept that, Rose. But with regards to my autism, like the only thing that is hard is that when I do get stressed out, I do perseverate, I do repeat myself. I have a hard time expressing myself in words. What I'm doing right now, I'm going to heavily edit this video because I go off into tangents and I ramble. And even though I have these great things to express, it's all kind of happening at once with all these patterns, and it's hard for me to really get it well. And when I do, it's great, but it's a hard thing to do, to lasso those thoughts, and I find sometimes I do better in like blogging, and I do best of all in poetry and music. That's easy. It's easy for me because I think that's how I think initially, is in these like tonic patterns, like musical patterns. So I'm not like ashamed or of who I am. I know who I am. I know what I'm experiencing, both challenges and gifts. And I believe it's led me to question how the world can change. Because it needs to. And why am I here dealing with this? Why did I go through this? I might as well make something good out of it. Share my thoughts, and I am not the only one. I'll tell you that. There are millions of people experiencing what I'm experiencing. I'm lucky in ways that it's been identified for me because a lot of people are going under the radar still. But there are more and more that are recognizing themselves either on the autism spectrum or even sometimes on the connective tissue spectrum, and or both. I tell you, we do exist. I call my blog a rainbow zebra corn. And it's a joke because zebra means, not of the horses. When you hear hoofbeats, you don't expect it to be a zebra. You expect it to be a horse. That's what the doctors say. So people with Ehlers-Danlos connective tissue disorder call themselves zebras. I said rainbow zebra because everybody has their individual colors, but I said zebra corn because unicorns are a mythical creature and people don't want to believe that they exist and don't want to see them as existing. So I call myself a zebracorn because it's how I feel that the world wants to treat people like me. The medical community has very little idea how to deal with this connective tissue problem, autoimmune epidemic and fibromyalgia and stuff. And now this connective tissue thing, I mean, they don't have any idea how to deal with it, and they're scared of it, so they don't want to look at it. So there's a lot of denial going on right now. Therefore, I'm a zebracorn. But I need to speak because I'm here and I exist, and so do you. If you're listening to this and you're also a zebracorn, you know what I mean. And I encourage you to speak out. Just like I say on my website, check out my website. There's opportunities on there to speak out or to start your own thing. We have to come together, support each other, and speak out. Because the more that do that, the more the systems will start accommodating us, and the world will start to accept us and understand us. And we're here to change the world, I believe. Well, we can't do that until we're being accepted by those who are neurotypical. No offense to them, and I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they are not neurodiverse and not physically diverse. Those are the people that need to have compassion, and we need to get along in harmony from that point somehow.